All right, so more action on ETFs, and the only difference is now that ETFs are being approved, but they're being approved across the pond in the EU. We'll break down all that for you guys today, what this might mean to the US in terms of an ETF approval, and hopefully going forward with Bitcoin and the modern era of finance. We'll break all that down for you. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back in to Tech Path. All right, so a couple of things I want to hit on today, of course, is the news. Europe launches its first spot Bitcoin ETF. I know that that's a little bit, let me kind of zoom in on that from Watcher Guru. I know that's a little bit misleading because there has been ETFs in the EU before. This one is a little different. I'll explain why there is. So it's technically there is a new ETF out there. So Jacobi Asset Management lists Europe's first Bitcoin ETF on Euronext. This, of course, is the difference. Let me kind of zoom in on a few things here. They implemented a verifiable built-in renewable energy, so it's a REC solution, which allows institutional investors to access the benefits of Bitcoin, also meeting the ESG goals, which is a big deal in the EU. Trades under the ticker BCOIN. Custodial services are provided none other than by Fidelity. And all of this is created in collaboration with a digital asset platform called Zumo. And Zumo is going to be interesting because we'll play into that. They're a kind of a everything as a service type platform. Further into the release, it's exciting to see Europe moving ahead of the US opening up Bitcoin. Unlike other products in the European market, which are debt instruments, our funds own the underlying asset directly. So that's kind of the biggest deal. This is the first true ETF that is owning the asset itself, the underlying asset, one-to-one. So that's the big point that they're trying to make. Jacobi's solution differs from carbon offsetting products by quantifying the electricity consumption attributable to Bitcoin in the ETF by purchasing equivalent RECs and the standardized instrument for procuring clean power. So again, going back into those ESG requirements that are a big deal in the EU. So as you look at this and you just wonder, when will the United States start to actually get into the game? EU obviously now scoring what feels like a 2-0 match if you're into soccer. And that is with Mika's advancement and now here with a true spot Bitcoin ETF. So along with that, and then you've got technology that's starting to play into this. Zumo, which is the company behind this, latest update of Zumo's app is now available on the App Store and the Google Play Store. You can trade doing fast transactions. You can also do a full, what they call infinite control your funds on the blockchain, and then you can do some buying and selling over there in Ethereum and Bitcoin. So this gets into how and what will be the next step here in the United States, because obviously we already know that we are at the cusp of, we hope, at the cusp of the SEC actually approving one. But there's a lot of other things that are playing into this that I think are the political aspect. And this is what I talk about a lot, is that this has become so much more political than anything. What I mean by that is by the SEC actually doing the approval of a Bitcoin spot ETF. One thing that is happening is you've got things like this, and that is Senator Lummis now filing an amicus brief supporting Coinbase's dismissal motion against the SEC. This would be a big deal because if the SEC, or if we get a dismissal on the Coinbase case, it would be a pretty big loss for the SEC. And already we've started to see this issue facing the SEC as a whole, just with what's happening in the Ripple case. So I think that in the support of what's happening from the lawmaker side of things, you can kind of see the statements here. Says the Constitution empowers Congress, not the SEC, to legislate in such an area of profound economical, political significance. This to me gets into the point that is often underlooked, and I think that is the political power that is happening globally, much like what happened with the EU on filing an ETF for spot Bitcoin. And I think this is now in the case of a lot of lawmakers who have said, all right, we've had enough. We've got to be able to move forward on this. Further in this article says, although the SEC seeks broad authority over crypto assets, most legislative proposals in Congress would instead grant much of the authority to other agencies. Unsatisfied, the SEC seeks to circumvent the political process to commandeer that authority itself. This is a senator talking about a government agency in the SEC. Of course, Meta Lawman, who's been on our show many times, kind of breaks it down. I'll show you his tweet right here. He kind of goes into the brief and what she's arguing. Let me zoom in on that. Congress has not granted the SEC authority, so that's number one. Defining the contours of crypto regulation in this country is a job for Congress, not the SEC. Back to the point of where a bipartisan effort of lawmakers is really the goal here, because the SEC has kind of taken the reins of what crypto has been about in terms of legislation by enforcement, which has been the biggest knock on the SEC over the past few years. SEC's claim that virtually all crypto assets are securities exceeds the securities authority, encroaches on Congress's lawmaking, and contravenes the separation of powers. So again, very much said. And I think this is one thing we've talked about so many times here on the show. The key is, when is that next step? When do we see a potential for this going forward? I think the key with this is how many people are starting to support what's happening in not only the lawmakers, but also in support of Coinbase, also other organizations out here. So you've got crypto lobbyists urge now court to also dismiss the case. And you'll look in total here. Let me kind of zoom in on that. You've got the Blockchain Association, the Crypto Council for Innovation, Chamber of Digital Commerce, DeFi Education Fund, or Chamber of Progress, Consumer Tech Associations, and even firms like Andreessen Horowitz, which obviously is a huge VC organization that supports what's happening in blockchain. Further into this one, it says this is a no run-of-the-mill enforcement case. Through this case, the SEC seeks primary influence over economic, political, and legal questions under active consideration by Congress and multiple agencies. That is the real rub that I think is occurring. And it's, as I've said many times, that this is such a political ploy right now. I don't understand why the SEC is holding back so much of this in terms of trying to dominate the conversation and also the actions from a control factor. I think it's either it's a controllable grab or there is a political, substance behind this that's really driving what Gensler's decisions are pushing. So a couple other points in here. Lummis brief did note each of these bills recognizes that the crypto industry is not fit entirely within the existing securities law and transcends the current statutory powers of the SEC. Simply stating, we know that there's a lot of things here in modern finance and modern blockchain technology that is really kind of going outside the ecosystem, meaning the investment contract concept of how securities are ruled and governed has changed. So Congress is attuned to these important considerations, and obviously they're trying to do something about that right now. So we do know that all of that is happening right now, and it's moving pretty fast. Now, here's John Reed Sark, another attorney out there on SEC and especially securities law. He talks a little bit further about this, about the partisanship around this. So crypto regs have unfortunately become increasingly partisan at the SEC. Remember that right now the SEC, the governors or the commissioners at the SEC split pretty much down the middle right now on Democratic, Republican. Crypto crackdown began under Republican-appointed SEC Chair Clayton, fierce and relentless crypto critic. If we do see a Republican elected president, likelihood is that we'd probably see a potential Republican lead as the commissioner. Now, that could be Hester Pierce, a Republican. All this does play into this. So it has become very partisan. And I would agree with Stark on this. So it is something to watch for. Question is whether or not there will be anything of major substance happening between now and when that occurs, meaning when we see lawmakers actually shift in the House, if we do see lawmakers shift in the administration. Here's a clip right here by Raoul Pal kind of breaking down why all of this is happening. Listen into this one, what he had to say.
The problem is US regulation is run by a bunch of baby boomers who only reference the past. Like, we have to figure out how to deal with AI. We got a lot of really existentially important things that can't be just shoehorned into something from the 1930s because that's how a boomer wants it to be. And other governments are doing it, and the US is not. Whether it's the power of the people or just the politicians are so old now that they'll be replaced by younger people.
I hope Raoul is right. Working in Capitol Hill with lobbyists in the past, I've seen the birth of, kind of this political and governmental heft that just sits in DC. And I think crypto and blockchain in general is just like any other great technology moving forward. AI will face this as well in terms of regulatory environments. and what that might mean, because really at the end of the day, what we are talking about here is corruption at the highest level. We're talking about whose pockets are lined. That's why this is slowing down. It really is more about who wins. And until there is a framework for the right politicians winning it the right way, we may not see action. And that's the biggest concern. And obviously, Raoul's talking about that, is that there's so many other countries that have already stepped into this and moving forward. You have John Deaton saying, though, that there could be a major move here. And this could also sway into the fact that we might get more pressure. This is coming from our court system, not from our politicians. So be on the lookout today, Friday, for a potential decision. This was earlier. This should hopefully give crypto even more momentum, even though arbitrary capricious is a high and difficult standard to meet. I've always maintained the SEC will lose if someone fought back regarding a spot Bitcoin ETF. He's talking about Grayscale. So Eric Balkunas kind of jumps in. Very good possibility that we learn Grayscale SEC outcome tomorrow. This was just here end of yesterday. We haven't heard it yet as of filming right now. So likelihood is we may get an actual case win here, and that would really put the SEC in a bad position. It would put them in a bad position from a legal standpoint and actually start to put a lot more pressure on them. And that's when it gets a little bit unusual, because now we're talking about a court that is ruling on this. So meaning it's ruling from a court of law, as opposed to regulators who are trying to essentially create a pathway for this technology and all these kind of companies to exist. So that's the biggest thing I think that's playing out. I want to play another clip right here. This, of course, is of Jay Clayton talking about the current status of not only crypto, but also Bitcoin. Listen to what, now remember, Clayton, former SEC chair, Gensler's boss used to be, and now he's taking a little different time. Listen in.
Well, look, the SEC postponed the decision, but they are seeking public comment. And the landscape for Bitcoin and retail access to Bitcoin has definitely changed. And let's just look at where we are today. I, when I was SEC chair, was very skeptical of the Bitcoin trading markets. And whether you believe Bitcoin is going to go to whatever or dry up and go away, I think that's no longer the question. You had Russ Benham on. He was talking about it's clearly a commodity. It should be regulated like a commodity. We have large retail participation around the globe, and people want access to it. Now, what do we have? We have very credible financial institutions who have fiduciary duties of best interest to their customers, who are saying, we want to deliver this product, and we can do so consistent with those obligations. Last thing.
All right, so right there, you can kind of see he has pivoted his position. This is a guy who was a staunch critic of crypto, changed completely, and he did hit on all the markers there: major financial institutions, the blockchain itself, Bitcoin as a whole, not going away, likelihood, whether you want to treat it as a commodity, which I think obviously they will. The key here is that it's not really on regulators like the SEC to decide who wins and who loses. The markets do that, and I think that's the most important thing that he does hit on here on this. But again, that coming from Jay Clayton, pretty interesting stuff for sure. All right, so Bitcoin ETF is now pushing a slice of crypto ETF trading volume, which would be around 99%. This, of course, means simply that though the EU has launched an ETF, a true spot ETF, the real volume is going to come from the United States. This is the big behemoth. If you look here, there's actually a chart that shows that North America accounts for 97.7% of all crypto ETF trading volume. If and when a spot ETF comes out in the US, it will likely go to 99.5%. So as interesting as the EU is, that's why we probably didn't see much of a move on Bitcoin in general, it really is all about the United States. And I think that's what Raoul was getting at, is that there is so much power coming out of the United States in terms of investment capacity and what that might mean, that the opportunity here is pretty significant. So I just think it's one of those things that you have to just be aware of, especially as we see both what's happening on the EU and also what's happening, obviously, here in the United States when it comes to ETFs. So one thing to be aware of for sure. All right, so just kind of supporting a little bit of the activity that's occurring right here. Here's the news on this. Eagerly awaited Jacobi Bitcoin ETF, lukewarm reception on the debut. And they're kind of hitting on the whole issue. Only 4 transactions. This, of course, happened after its first listing. You can kind of see it right here in the listings themselves. Transactions 4. So again, this just reinforces the whole point that everything around Bitcoin's ETF future is going to set here in the United States. It just is going to be the case. I want to, just to further why this is so important, I want to go to this tweet right here, and there's a clip I want to play from this, but I want to go to the statement here. A lot of Bitcoin ETFs have been filed, but just BlackRock is the 800-pound gorilla, truly the one. Why is BlackRock different? It comes down to lobbying power and the connections with the SEC. Listen into what he had to say. Let me play this one for you.
One of the major narratives driving the last cycle was the institutions are coming. Those institutions came in small part, you had Tesla, you had MicroStrategy, that they were investing in Bitcoin, but that promise of the institutions arriving and really diving headfirst into crypto never quite materialized. So that's what's so interesting about our current period, which, we may be in a crypto winter, we might be coming out of it, but if there are signs that we're coming out of it, it's exactly this institutional investment. So BlackRock, for example, is the largest asset manager in the world. And they just filed a Bitcoin ETF with the SEC. A lot of Bitcoin ETFs have been filed in the past years, but none from an asset manager as high profile and well connected in Washington as BlackRock.
As you can see, the key here is how much, power does BlackRock have? Well, they have an immense amount of power. Now, one thing that our team kind of mentioned on while we were doing this video is what happens if BlackRock gets an ETF or ARK gets an ETF and we just don't see any transaction. I'm kind of interested in your thoughts. Do you think we'll see a massive inroad of people going into Bitcoin? I believe we will, mainly because of the power of the marketing that will come behind this. It'll come from ARK, it'll come from Galaxy, it'll come from BlackRock, VanEck, you name it. They're all going to be competing pretty much at the same time, meaning they're going to spend a lot of money to get out there and educate people and get things going. That's why I do think it's going to pop Bitcoin as a whole for sure. All right, further on into this, just to show you a little bit more around what this might mean for the market. Bitcoin ETF approval could help power up the new crypto cycle. This is coming in from Bernstein. We've talked about him before. He hits on a couple of points here. Leading global asset manager, is in Bitcoin spot ETFs. Probability of this approval has risen. We've already talked about that. ETF will benefit a strong brand marketing push. That's back to my point, is that all these financial advisors and all these groups are going to push very hard, which is going to elevate the awareness around blockchain and crypto, and especially Bitcoin as a whole. So new capital is going to power up the new cycle. This will come in from fresh stablecoin supply, tokenized traditional assets, native crypto infrastructure, tokenization of ETFs, etc. All of that plays out. And back to the clip that we just played here by Sam just a second ago with the Forbes writer, is, he is right. The last cycle was kind of deemed as this is going to be when institutions come in. But BlackRock wasn't in the game, nor was these 15 others that have started to move in. That we did not have an ETH ETF being proposed, and most likely going to get approved right on the heels, I believe, of what happens with Bitcoin. None of that was occurring. We didn't have regulation in play. We didn't have the clarity in the market where we had to go through basically the wars of FTXs, the Voyagers, the Celsiuses, seeing what was all done wrong. Now we have a much more, aware market. We have a much more savvy investor, and we have these major organizations starting to step in. So I think it is in the right place. Right now, of course, we're recording this. There's constant news always hitting our research team. One of the things that has happened is this tweet right here, and that is Balkunas talking about, looks like no Grayscale decision. So this has been delayed, meaning Grayscale Trust. This is now going to Friday, 11 a.m. is the next batch, so stay tuned. So right now, still on delay for a decision around that. Further into his Twitter is interesting. Volatility Shares also announced that they intend to list their Ethereum futures ETF. This is the futures ETF on October 12th. That's, what are we talking about, a month and a half away here? Would be which would be a day or two ahead of the rest of the pack if the 75 days is adhered to. And remember, they did the same thing with the Bitcoin futures ETF, which they got approved. They were the company that actually, the investment house that actually got that approved. So Volatility Shares already coming out on this. The ticker will be ETHU, so ETHU right there. So there you go, guys. This gets to where, back to my point, is that the political side of this still playing into this, but the pressure is starting to really mount on the SEC. A lot of things are moving in the fire for sure. As I mentioned, also, Coinbase expands across the Great White North and going into Canada. And again, remember, Binance exited out of there. Coinbase comes in. I would look at this as a moderate move. I know that there have been people talking about, hey, this is a big deal. Coinbase is in Canada, blah, blah, blah. I just don't see the Canadian market, even though they have an ETF. Yes, that is true. But the trading capital in Canada, and it's not anything against Canadians, it's just we're dealing with a different animal altogether. I would look at the EU as a more powerful player. I would look at Asia as a more powerful player. It's a good thing that Coinbase is going there. It only makes Coinbase stronger. And I think the key here is whether or not Coinbase is going to have any kind of issue here in the United States. That's the real core to the future of Coinbase. And if you look at a couple of things that were stated in this, Coinbase noted that Canada boasts an enthusiastic local tech ecosystem, also striving towards a clear regulatory framework. That's good. Coinbase's next go deep market, we're making significant investments to help Canadian assets. I think that's good too. But one thing that Brian Armstrong has said before, and that is that there is no plan whatsoever, it's not even on the table, that they're looking at in any way exiting the United States, even though they are trying to framework, capacities for better regulatory environments to deal with what could be maybe years before we see real regulation play into this. Coinbase understands the market to win for the future of crypto, especially with what they're doing on Base right now, is right here in the United States. So just remember that. It's a very, very big deal. All right, so last article here, quickly, Cointelegraph, Coinbase VP says Canada could be a global leader. Here's the point. Everybody wants to be a global leader right now. You've got the EU claiming it, you've got Asia claiming it, you've got El Salvador claiming it. You've got everybody claiming it because they know that this is the future of the monetary systems worldwide. The only difference is the United States is going to be the one. And that's not being arrogant or anything. It's just looking at the facts of where the volume is coming from the global leader. And I think right now we are doing so much infighting. The minute the United States gets online with this is going to change the future and the fabric of what's happening in crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum. All these scenarios will start to play out and truly become the global leader. That'll be the question. If you think that is the case, hit the like button. If you don't think that's the case, let me know your reasons. I'd love to get them. Just drop some comments down below. All right. We'll continue to run some more stuff this week. We've got a lot happening right now. There's more news coming out of DC with Prometheum, many things that are hitting the news cycle right now. We'll try to get those to you as best and quickly as we can. If you're not in the Diamond Circle, make sure and jump in now. It is another way for you to get fast updates on what we're doing, not here on the YouTube channel. It's additional podcasts, more research, all that good stuff. All you have to do is just join that link down below. If you guys want to catch me, it's out there on Twitter, @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechBath.